welcome everybody to look in the future. What would you do if you can go to the future and ask yourself questions? How do you grow your firm? How can you transition to advisory services and more? Well, luckily for all of us, we can just ask the time traveler himself, Paul Latham, and learn the knowledge we need at our firms today to evolve in advisory services and become the most relevant advisor to our clients. Because we all know that's what it's all about. So as always, the legendary time traveler Paul Latham of Hay and Rock Solutions is here with us today. And today, Paul, I thought I'd kind of pick your brain on something I've been hearing from some firms that I work with. They've been amazed, in the past, their quote unquote toolbox of what they did, what they needed was, tax return software and audit software. And I'm seeing a lot of realization in 2020 with everything that's changing and the broad services to like, oh my God, there's other tools that I need. So let's kind of hear from you how you guys realize that at Latham and kind of your insights on the different tools firms need today.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a really good question, Garrett. I think, it's one of those questions that covers a bunch of things. I think the key aspects with regard to having a toolbox are it's got something strongly to do with making it feel real. And it's also got something to do with being able to leverage and do something more than once. So I think if you start with the one but make it feel real, at the end of the day, advisory services is all about providing a proactive service. And as we've talked many times in the past, the thing about proactivity is it's hugely intangible. So it's sort of really hard if you just keep it totally intangible. So the more you can actually then define exactly what you're doing, define the service and sort of break it into steps, the better. And it does help if you have a few tools. So for example, one of the more important tools I think is having a diagnostic tool. And you see where that came from, you go back to the Latham's days, was, well, first of all, I always used to say, do you want the reactive service or the proactive? And obviously they said they wanted the proactive. And then I came up with this thing of saying, well, but there are two ways of being proactive. There's being proactive for me, which is basically selling you stuff. And by the way, I said this to the clients, I can either be proactive for me and just sell you stuff. And I'm guessing you won't like that. And probably as an accountant, I wouldn't feel comfortable with it either. Or we can be proactive for you, client. And, bottom line is I can't tell by looking at you what's important to you. So the very first thing we always do is try and understand your needs. And this is a two-way street and you've got to help me. But we have this thing, we call it a diagnostic tool. And if we go through it, it will help to identify your needs. So I think, there's an example of, I think it'd be really hard to do that if you didn't have a consistent tool. And it would also make it difficult to leverage. And that's, because otherwise you'd just be constantly reinventing the wheel and thinking of different questions to ask and letting the client divert you. So by having in this case, a diagnostic tool, you're explaining why you need it. You're then giving that client the diagnostic. By definition, then you are leading the client to a place you want to get to. And it's sort of like selling, except it's focused on understanding needs. And, there's an example of if you didn't have a tool, really, really difficult. At the other end of the spectrum, and we could go all the way through, because I honestly think that sort of analogy is applicable all the way through advisory. You go right to the end, you've identified the needs. Your clients will have a multitude of needs. We'll prioritize them, but there's a strong chance that you personally are not the expert in that area. So another tool then would be, we've talked about it before, the expert zone or the virtual family office, whatever you want to call it, the ability to solve the client's problems by having essentially a toolbox, let's look at the types of problems, let's find the experts, let's approach them and so on. So I think these are all examples of where it partly makes the intangible feel real, and it partly provides a structure to what you do, and it definitely allows you to leverage. And I think those are the sort of key factors. I don't know what you think, Gareth.
Yeah, I think it helps it make it real. You know, you're not trying to figure things out every single time. And like before, you wouldn't do an audit without the tools.
Yep.
So why are you trying to get into business advisory work without some tools there to guide you through it? And I think, Paul, to get a little more granular than even what you kind of said there, I bring it down to things like the, you know, in the Hainrock solutions, there's the value prop exercise and like the idea evaluator and a few more. Like those are tools that you can use just like you'd use a work paper on taxes that figure out deferred taxes or an audit work paper to audit receivables. Like it's a tool that's going to help you think about when you're talking to the client, how do I help them evaluate ideas? Okay.
Yeah. Yes. And I think this also comes, I mean, I used a phrase a couple of minutes ago, leading the client. So value proposition is a good example. Now, you know, by using, in this case, the value proposition tool, there is a methodology to it. Mm-hmm. But by definition, you are leading the client through that methodology. If you don't do that, then it becomes a free-for-all in terms of the conversation. And the other thing is, I mean, I'm a big believer in you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so when you go through, for example, the value proposition tool, there is a beginning, there's an explaining how it works. There's a listing process, there's a scoring process, there's an evaluating process. It produces a graph, and then you summarize it in a nice pithy little sort of value proposition statement, and you know you finished. So that's the, you know, unless we want to keep working on it, you've gone through a process and you know when you finished. And I mean, today, you know, I was doing a vision workshop today, and by going through that, two of the tools that we used in that, you know, we end up summarizing all these discussions. We click a button, it produces a roadmap document. We go through the prioritizer, click a few buttons, it produces a one-page plan. Those are the outputs of a vision workshop: roadmap document, one-page plan. We know we finished. Great, stop. and this is all really, these are all down to defining what we're doing, and then making it easier to do. And part of that defining what you're doing is making it feel real. And making it easier to do is all part of this, you know, let's leverage it. Let's do it the same way. And if you think about, you know, an accounting firm, more often than not, you've got, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 partners at least. More often than not, you've got more than one person. And if you don't have a tool, the chances are you'll do it 2 different ways. And then you've sort of got this horrible situation where you can't create a brand within your own firm because, you know, let's just say we were in partnership, Gareth, you know, and there's the 2 of us at 2 separate doors, and clients walk in, and they either walk in through the Garrett door or they walk in through the Paul door, and they get the service delivered in 2 different ways. Oh, and it becomes a lottery then, what your firm is doing. I mean, and you use the analogy of tax software, you know, well, we do it one way here. We've got one way of producing a tax return, and this is the software we use. Well, it's no different with advisory. Here's our process. Here's our tools. Here's the output. And by the way, it makes no difference whether you talk to Garrett or whether you talk to Paul. This is the service you get. So I think it's a combination of all those things.
Yeah, but that's what it comes down to when I see that when firms struggle with this. It's like I'll use the tax software analogy. It's like saying we don't use tax software. So we've got partner A and partner B, you and me. We both do our return by hand, and you know, something comes out. That's not scalable. That's repeatable. It's just chaos. No one would ever try and do that today.
Yes.
Ever. But what we try and do is say, oh, Paul, you want me to do a strategic plan for you? Great. I'll be there next Thursday. Garrett's going to put his hat on, and he's going to do something. He's going to show up with a pen and paper, and he's going to do something. He's going to say something. He's going to do something, and he's going to give them something. He'll figure it out every time. That's not scalable. That's not a business in any shape. So,
well, exactly. I mean, again, if we go back into us being in partnership, you know, let's just say we were called G&P, Garrett and Paul. You know, so either we've got the Garrett and Paul methodology around which we can create, you know, a brand and marketing. You know, come to us, get business advisory. Here's what you get. Yeah. Or we just end up with these 2 ways of doing it, which I call partner in a bottle. And you know, you can either get Garrett in a bottle, or you can get Paul in a bottle. Or if we do it together by using common tools, we get the Garrett and Paul methodology. And clearly, one is, you know, that way is better than us just constantly reinventing reinventing the wheel and making it hard for ourselves.
So the key takeaway for everyone watching is get into business advisory, get the tools that you need. Don't do it willy-nilly, don't guess, get the tools that you need. And if you're confused what to do, reach out to us. Takeaway from today's show, reach out to me or Paul, ask us, we'll chat with you. Hey, here's what some of the tools look like. Here's how you can get started. That's the best thing you can do as we move through the end of 2020 for yourself, your firm, and being ready for the future. So with that, you know the drill. Click the link, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we challenge you every day to take action to change the world and invest in yourself.